This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy, How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com. Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, another fantastic show with another fantastic guest. First, a few in-house matters. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember we're a fan-generated program. We're under a lot of persecution as well by the globalists and the powers that be. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our Rumble channel, and hit instant notifications. Go to jamieglazov.com and subscribe to our newsletter, and please support us there if you can. Follow me on Twitter at jamieglazov, and as always, be supporting Annie Cyrus at liveuptofreedom.com. She's fighting a very important battle for the truth and for the defense of America and for the West. And backed by popular demand, what an honor and privilege to have with us this evening Jack Cashill, a writer, producer, and the author of his most recent book, ASHLI, The Untold Story of the Women of January 6th. Jack, what an honor to have you back.
Jamie, great to be here on this historic evening, right? The fate of the free world was just, we were all at peace now, knowing that it's in such able hands.
It's actually terrifying, and in a surreal way too. Some kind of weird joke is being played on us. Jack, you are an expert on many things, including January 6th. The debate that took place in the recent past between Trump and Biden, some things were mentioned there in connection to January 6th, and I think that you could shed some very profound wisdom on that for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jake Tapper, it was interesting about the questions that Jake Tapper was asking, because they seemed fair, but they were inevitably loaded. And as was this question to Donald Trump on January 6th. And basically the question came like this, as President of the United States and you're sworn to uphold the Constitution, what do you say to people who basically criticized your actions and inactions on that fateful day? That's a paraphrase, but it's close. The two key words were actions and inactions. And when Trump responded, I think he did it strategically. Rather than trying to defend himself, it would have taken more than 2 minutes to explain, what I could take 2 hours to tell you. But he basically went into talking about Nancy Pelosi, whose responsibility was protecting the Capitol, and who, before she realized what a public relations bonanza January 6th could be, was caught on camera by her own daughter, just going berserk, realizing that it was the greatest failing of a person responsible for the protection of the Capitol since the War of 1812. That was her job. And she did it wrong in 1,000 different ways. But that's not what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear about Trump's actions and inactions. So Biden attempts to answer it. He mangled the action part, but he got right to the heart of the inaction part. And then he gets into his angry mode. He did absolutely nothing to call that riot insurrection off, or whatever he said. Trump did nothing. That was the talking point. That's been the talking point. The other talking point is the one that's embedded in Jack Smith's indictment, that Trump obstructed justice by inciting the mob to storm the Capitol, et cetera, et cetera. Both of those implicit parts of that question were based on false premises. For one, Trump's actions had nothing to do with the riot at the Capitol, for one major reason. I'll explain in a second. And the other is that Trump tried several times to restore peace through tweeting, and then only to be blocked by Twitter. So it's been a lie from the beginning, Jamie, and we've got 5 months to untell that lie.
Jack, the Republican Party seems to be gun shy on this. Wouldn't you think that the Republican Party, it would be in its best interest to make the media face the truth about Trump's actions and inactions, this whole farce that happened, there seems to be a weakness there or some kind of fear.
There is a fear, and it's a real weakness, and it's unfortunate because it's allowed many good patriots to fester in prison for the last 3 years. The recent ruling by the Supreme Court and the was it the Schick case offers hope to these people, but the prosecutors are going to try to work around that ruling. Basically, the Supreme Court ruled that you could not take a law that was created to stop shredding paper after Enron debacle, as part of the Sarbanes-Oxley case, and impose it on people who were, many of whom were simply just wandering around the Capitol with no intention of obstructing anything. So, and that was also used against Trump, the notion that he was obstructing something. In Trump's case, there's a very specific alibi, if you need an alibi, and that is that he started his speech an hour late for reasons I still can't figure out. But it threw the conspirators' plans off, because by starting at noon instead of 11, he didn't get to the meat of his, the really angry heart of his comments until about 1:10. And this is the part that's cited both in the January 6th committee report and also in Jack Smith's indictment. They have him saying, you got to go, you got to fight like hell, you got to fight like hell. Of course, both those entities omit you have to, march peacefully and patriotically. Totally omitted. Most Americans who watch CNN have never heard that. They don't know that. So the Trump team and the Republicans have a chance to set the record straight, because they'll bring it up. Now that they're floundering as they are, they're going to raise this issue for the next 4 months. So when Trump is saying you got to go fight like hell, the riot has already stood 15 minutes on. At 1:06 p.m., the police, for who knows what reason, start lobbing, flashbangs and smoke grenades, rubber bullets into a peaceful, still peaceful crowd at the foot of the Capitol on the west side. And that's at 1:06. Trump doesn't say fight like hell until 1:10. It's a 45-minute walk from the ellipse where Trump is speaking to the Capitol. The people who are listening to Trump didn't get to the Capitol until after 2:00, an hour after the action had started. And most of them had no part in that action. And when they arrived, all the signage, the little signage there was, bicycle racks, et cetera, those were all gone. They had no reason to believe that it wasn't just a regular day at the Capitol, especially those who came in on the east side, where there was not the mayhem there was on the west side.
But tell us your thoughts on how the debate and the Supreme Court decision affects this issue in a crystal clear way.
Well, what it does is that, in a sense, it takes the Supreme Court decision, it really takes Trump off the hook with regard to the January 6th indictment. That's, one of like 4 remaining indictments he faces, one of the 2 by Jack Smith, the other one being the documents issue. Between that and the presidential immunity, decision by the Supreme Court, Smith has no grounds to proceed, but, he's sort of like Ahab, there's only one white whale out there and you're going to go after it, and that Smith that's his mission in life right now. And I can't see him doing anything but trying to work around those Supreme Court decisions, just like the prosecutors are doing with the J6ers right now. They're trying to find reasons to keep them in prison or to make them serve out the rest of their sentences, even though the Supreme Court ruled that the application of this particular law to people who are protesting, whether peacefully or otherwise, is utterly and totally inappropriate and wrong and should not be part of their sentencing. But Washington is a really incredibly deceitful place now, has been for, really since Obama took office, with that one circuit break by Trump in the middle. We need to win in November. Otherwise, this all will continue and only get worse.
Jack, you've studied this a lot. You've written a book on it. Just when you have moments of silence digesting everything, What are some of the conclusions you've come up with? What really happened here?
You know, it's the question I think a lot of people who've looked at this closely ask themselves, because you have to be responsible. I don't want to, I have, when I do a book, like I just happen to copy handy here, actually. You have a legal review. You can't just say stuff. And so what I've concluded is that first, if you're looking for an overarching conspiracy organized by a given entity, you're not going to find it. What you're going to find is a half a dozen minor conspiracies organized by various entities involved, some freelance, some rogue, some, I would include the Democratic National Committee in this. I would also include, the Capitol Police, the FBI, and the Metropolitan Police Department, all playing a role, many of them having as a goal embarrassing Donald Trump and ending the MAGA movement. And the way to do that is to create confusion, mayhem, and then to blame it on Trump. One of the things I discovered, for instance, Jamie, and I don't think anyone else has talked about this, is that I've watched countless hours of video. And one video I saw was this guy swinging a bat at the Capitol Police. There's a metal bat. I mean, they had shields, so they're fending him off, but he was as violent as anyone I saw that day. And here's what happened to him. He gets arrested. He goes before a judge. His attorney comes in and says, this fellow is mentally incompetent and he lives in a homeless shelter. And the judge says, yeah, that's okay. Get him out of here, right? No jail time, no nothing, right? His name's Emmanuel Jackson. He's African-American. He lives in Washington. He probably was mental incompetent. He probably was living in a homeless shelter. But, I worked with James O'Keefe a lot when he was still with Project Veritas. And one of the stings they did was with this one guy named Scott Foval, who was with the DNC. He was a sort of an operative. And what he would do, and he bragged about it on camera, and this is a practice of longstanding in the Democratic ranks, is what they call bird dogging. They would get a person who was a homeless guy or a guy who was mentally ill. They would train him up a little bit, send him to a Trump rally, ask him to create a ruckus, to start a fuss. And when anyone responded and there was some sort of fight, then the media, of course, would swoop in and blame it on Trump's people. That they had to cancel an event in Chicago because the bird doggers, had made such a fuss out of it. This guy was a classic bird dogger. Foval would brag about how they'd get a homeless guy, they'd put him in a hotel for a night, clean him up a little bit, give him some talking points. So when Emmanuel Jackson, the fellow in question, is interviewed, he says something about, he was interviewed by another protester. He says, yeah, I'm here to fight globalism, right? Like he got a 3-word training session. And there are many different rogue operatives involved in that day. Some, we know, the Capitol Police were punished or at least sanctioned for urging the protesters on to commit, at least to break in, to move along, pushing them from behind. And the women I cover, Jamie, the 8 who survived, many of them got caught. And in fact, Roseanne Boylan, one of them too, who died. You're in a crowd of 200-pounders and you weigh 110 pounds. You're going where that crowd goes. You don't have the will to resist it. And 2 of them both Roseanne Boylan and Victoria White got pushed into that one tunnel entrance. Roseanne was killed there, and Victoria White suffered the most, I would say, egregious police beating ever captured on video. She was hit 30 or 40 times by baton-wielding Metropolitan PD officers. And she has a lawsuit pending. And once that video surfaced, the Department of Justice had to back off. Otherwise, she'd be looking at years in prison. And then instead, she got like 4 weekends in prison. But it is the way they roll. There were different operatives doing different things.
Yeah.
And curiously, the one person who screwed up everyone's plans was, or maybe our next president, Kamala Harris. You know that story, right? For the audience who doesn't, there were pipe bombs reportedly discovered at 1 p.m. That was the witching hour. That was the hour that Trump's people should have been arriving at the Capitol if he hadn't started an hour late. That was the hour that Ray Epps started his breach of the perimeter barricades. And that was the hour the pipe bombs were found at the RNC and the DNC. And there was, initially, of course, they blamed it on the Trump people, pro-Trump people planted these bombs. That was the story that went out. Everyone believed it. And then there was a national manhunt for the bombers, right? And $500,000 reward. Pictures were taken of them planting the bombs the night before. And then they realized that Kamala Harris, for reasons still unknown, was at the DNC that day. So her presence at the DNC meant the Secret Service was at the DNC. That meant the Secret Service did a sweep of the building with their dogs while Kamala Harris was there, while the bombs were allegedly planted there and didn't come up with them. So for the next year, Jamie, Kamala Harris said nothing about her presence at the DNC. No one knew. In fact, the prosecutors and the J6 prosecutors were charging people, the protesters, with endangering the life of Kamala Harris at the Capitol. Everyone assumed she was at the Capitol. So for a year, this is incredible when you think about it, how the media work. We saw it, well, hell, they could conceal Biden's state of mind for 4 years. They could conceal Kamala Harris's presence for a year. It wasn't until the anniversary date, January 6, 2022, that she finally acknowledged she wasn't at the, and what that meant, though, then, was that the whole bomb thing now just seems like part of the hoax. That seems like the pre-planned part. And the fact that Kamala Harris, who, drama queen that she is, would love to have boasted that she was within feet of a bomb that could have killed her and dashed her dreams and destroyed the republic, never to this day has said a word about the pipe bombs. Neither has Joe Biden. I mean, she is the classic dog that didn't bark, like in the Sherlock Holmes story. Sherlock comes to this paddock where a racehorse has been stolen, and he says, "Hey, do you have a watchdog here? What time did he bark?" And they say, "Funny thing, he didn't bark." Well, Kamala Harris is the dog that didn't bark. Sherlock Holmes came to the conclusion, of course, that the dog knew the thief. In this case, Kamala, she may not have known personally the bomber, but she knew enough not to say anything about it because they did not want to find this person. The powers that be understood that the person who planted the bombs, presuming they were even halfway real, was one of their own people.
Very, very bizarre. Thank you, Jack, for getting to the bottom of all of this. Tell us about your thoughts on dumping Biden. A lot of Democrats want to do that today, obviously, but it's very complicated in terms of Newsom, in terms of Michelle Obama, in terms of where Kamala stands. What do you make of all of it?
Well, I'm like a lot of people on our side, Jamie, who is rooting for Biden to do well tonight, in his NATO press conference. And he did just kind of well enough, to hold off the forces for another week. I don't know. But, it seems to me now that it's going to be very hard to get around Kamala. Clyburn, who's the head of the black, he's the real kingmaker in the Democratic Party, Representative Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. He said, there's no going around her. You can't, the idea of replacing her with a Gavin Newsom, not going to happen, or Gretchen Whitmer, not going to happen. And neither is Michelle Obama going to happen. It's just too late for that. And the longer Biden delays, and like you said tonight, whoever replaces him would have to match his ground organization. He has, operatives in 20 states, all the swing states, hundreds of volunteers, all set up to go. And if he's replaced, there's going to be chaos in the ranks. Of course, the media will pull up behind whoever the candidate is and support them and make believe they're the greatest candidate of all time. And they'll continue all the lies about Trump that Biden was expounding tonight. The existential crisis for a president who brought us the 4 most peaceful years of my lifetime, you know? So it'll be fun. It's interesting. It's much more interesting than we thought it would be, isn't it? I mean, you got to admit.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think in time they'll get to Biden. I think he'll step down. Kamala will take the place. And then I think they'll get together behind Kamala and try this massive public relations drive to convince us that she's really, Abraham Lincoln in drag. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be ferocious.
You think that, okay, Biden's not going to step down as president. He's going to finish the term, but in terms of who will be on the ticket, it will be Kamala?
I believe so. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have said that a month ago, but they're running out of time to make other candidates attractive, to launch their campaigns. It's getting too late in the game for them. And Biden left open a couple ifs about stepping down. He said, if this, if that, he doesn't want to do it, right? And if he's not capable of running for president, he's not capable of running the country. So it would be in the Democrats' best interest for him to step down. They want him to step down now. That way, Kamala gets to be president while she's running. She gets to choose a vice president, and that comes with the consent of, I believe, the Senate. And that'll be interesting. But so it's going to be a much more interesting 4 months than we anticipated. And we have the Republican convention coming up next week. Perfect timing to capitalize on this madness and to drive home to the American people that there's only one party being run by adults, and it's not the Democratic Party.
But is Kamala a disaster for the Democrats?
I mean, she would seem to be. I mean, in other words, she starts from a hole. She's had very low public opinion, but most people don't know much about her. And she will have a rehabilitation unmatched since, I can't even think of a good parallel here. A political rehabilitation since they pulled Richard Nixon out of the dump and ran him for president,
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, Jack. We got to go. Always so great to have you here. Before we go, tell our viewers about ASHLI, the untold story of the women of January 6th, where they can get it, why they should get it, and where they can check you out and follow you.
Well, I wrote the book, Jamie, to show basically why these women and why the other million people went to Washington on January 6th. So once I established the why of it, and then I walked through their personal lives that day and the days before, and I wanted to humanize the whole story so you get a sense of why and what happened and what happened consequently. But in the course of it, I kept stumbling across major truths that I was unaware of. Like, for instance, the manner in which Roseanne Boylan was killed, the manner in which Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick died and then was murdered after he died by operatives within the Democratic Party to great effect. And in both cases, the medical examiner of Washington cooperated in that cover-up. And also about the last minutes of ASHLI Babbitt, why she did what she did. And my takeaway, I started the book, Jamie, with the question of why did these women go to Washington? And I ended with the proposition of why did the rest of us stay home? I mean, what Thomas Jefferson called the injuries and usurpations that America suffered under the Obama-Biden regime were provocative enough and strong enough to merit everyone's being there and speaking up and having their voices heard. Because if you are like ASHLI Babbitt and you're running a pool supply company in San Diego, no one's going to listen to you. But if you're one of a million people, your voice will be heard and was heard.
Absolutely. Jack, I also want to say why everybody should read your books, why I always so much cherish your precious books is when I read the book about Muhammad Ali, when I read the book about Obama, this book about ASHLI, I always walk away thinking, I did not know that. I did not. You're always telling the details and the stories that our culture, our higher literary culture, our media do. They don't tell these stories, and that's your gift and your main interest, isn't it?
Right. They leave the big stuff on the table for
Yeah.
independent journalists like myself. And Jamie, I was like you. When I was researching this, I kept coming across stuff saying, I didn't know this. I thought I knew
Mm.
January 6th, right?
Yeah.
Major stuff, like the bomb
Yeah.
stuff, Kamala stuff, the beating of Victoria White in the tunnel. Things that should have been, and in and of themselves, would have been the biggest story of the first decade of this century, or
Absolutely.
other than September 11th. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
My friend Jack Cashill, we got to go. We hope you'll come back soon. But please, there's a lot of people on the edge of their seat right now. They might not be following you. Where do they go?
Go to cashill.com, cashill.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Jack Cashill. Follow me on Facebook, just Jack Cashill. I always use my real name. I got nothing to hide. And happy to hear from all your followers, Jamie.
Fantastic. Jack, thank you for always telling the stories that we don't know and for standing up for the truth in our very strange culture and society which is censoring the truth. Thank you for that.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for having me on and keep up the good work, sir.
Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, Jack Cashill, ASHLI, The Untold Story of the Women of January 6th. Get that book, and we'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.